Thank you very much for coming to the first TechSPARK virtual coffee morning. We're going to try and do these weekly over the next few months whilst we're all locked in our houses. I am super keen to get interesting people speaking and talking about things. So if you have interesting people or there are things that you want to talk about, please drop me or any of the team a note and we will pick that up and do things. The way we're going to have the format today is we're going to kick off in a minute with David Maher Roberts, who has very kindly agreed to be the guinea pig and be the first one of the people who were interviewed. So David and I are going to speak roughly for half an hour or so. If people have questions for DMR, please put them in the chat. What we'll do is my colleague Grant is going to collate those and Slack them to me, so I have them all in one place. And then from about 11:45, we'll do some of the questions for 5 or 10 minutes. And then around 5 to 12 o'clock, we will finish off the broadcast content section, and we'll encourage you all to go to the networking section, which is denoted by some little handshake emojis on the left of your screen. What that does is, in a very exciting way, it matches you up with other people who are in there randomly. And if you agree to be matched with them, it'll give you 2 minutes to have a chat probably about coronavirus. And then it will keep moving you around. So it'll give people a chance to chat with some people they don't know, chance to chat with some people they probably do know, because there's lots of names here that I recognize, and a chance to have a bit less social isolation. So that's sort of the plan. I hope someone can see what's happening, but I'm going to kick off. So, David, rather than me introducing you, do you want to introduce yourself? Because I feel like I've known you for a long time, but some of these people probably haven't done. So it'd be great if you could give us a précis of where you've been in the last 15 years and what you've been doing.
Okay. I might start with today and go backwards from there. So hi everybody. I'm only seeing the Ben and myself, so it feels like we're just having a chat, and I don't know if everybody else can see us and hear us, but hopefully it's all good. Hello. So I'm David Maher Roberts. A lot of people call me DMR. I never call myself that, but I guess it's a good way of differentiating from all the millions of Davids out there. So I'm the COO of an agency called Dialect. We are headquartered in San Francisco, and we have our main office in Bath. And we are a full-service agency that specializes in engaging tech and gaming audiences. So we create content, we do data analytics, and we run media campaigns, social media campaigns, we run YouTube channels, et cetera, all specifically for the tech and gaming audience. So that's our specialism. And so I've been doing that for about 3 years. And then prior to that, I was managing director of the sports group at Immediate Media, and worked there for a little bit, mostly focusing on cycling and triathlon and running and those sort of sports, running websites and magazines. Prior to that, I basically ran my own consultancy called Digital DNA, and I spent a lot of my time working with the government on the global entrepreneurs program. I worked with Ben and team at IBB at the time to help companies move to the Bristol and Bath area. I was there, was it Tech? I can't remember what the name was. Was it Tech Specialist? No.
Yeah.
something like that. And I also did a lot of consultancy for startups where I actually helped them using tools like the lean canvas process to help them work out really what their focus was. Did a lot of coaching and things like that. So I did that for about 3 or 4 years. And then prior to that, I was the CEO of a company called The Filter, which is still around today. And in my days, The Filter was very much started off its life as a music recommendation system, which was kind of before the days of Spotify artist radios and things like that. And it was a company that was founded by Peter Gabriel, and he invested also in it, as did Eden Ventures. And we had, lots of really cool clients where we basically offered our algorithms and our services to help build playlists and recommend music, or indeed movies or TV shows for people on services like, Sony's service or Hulu or BT. I think BT Vision still uses The Filter as its main recommendation engine. So that's kind of the last 15 years. I mean, before that, I was a director at Future Publishing. And that's kind of where I spent most of my time in my early career, where I went from magazine publishing into digital. And at Future, I was part of the team responsible for some pretty big launches like TechRadar and GamesRadar and the like, T3 online, etc. And I learned a lot about the web publishing model at that time. But hopefully that gives you a little bit of a background. I do have, that's like the career stats, I guess. I do have a lot of passion projects, and TechSPARK and the Sparkies was a big passion project for me. Started in, I think it's 2011, roughly, and put a good, I guess, 5 years of my life into it before passing it on to a much more able and dedicated team of Ben and Geraint, etc. And I've got a brand new passion project, which kicked off, well, it's been working on it for 9 months, but it actually saw light of day 4 weeks ago, which is called Seeking Out the Next Generation. And it's a podcast series which is dedicated to finding everyday people from the younger generation, so typically under 30, who have inspirational stories or experiences to share. Episode 4 went out on Tuesday, and it was with a local tech CEO, Paul Hetherington, who's a 22-year-old CEO from Bath Uni, who is one of the founders of Neuro AI, a company that builds computers specifically for artificial intelligence. So I'm absolutely adoring that project. Is what's keeping me sane during these very strange times.
So there's a lot there, and it's interesting. You sort of moved across a couple of different industries in the work that you're doing, and a lot of different sizes of organizations. So from organizations like Future and Immediate, who are hundreds and hundreds of people, down to founding things like TechSPARK, which was a group of volunteers, and everything in between. Have you always been entrepreneurial? Is that something that from an early age you thought, well, I want to try and start businesses? Was it a natural reaction to working in a large corporate that you think, no, I've had enough of this?
I don't know. I think from a character set or personality, like I always, when I sort of think about it as I get older, thinking about what do you like doing, right? So I don't never consider myself really as an entrepreneur per se, but I love making things happen. That's basically the thing that probably defines me. And I like making things happen quite fast, or certainly by bringing groups of people together and injecting purpose and some energy. I find that you can get an awful lot done. And yes, it sometimes lends itself to like business startups, but it also lends itself very well to community-based things or passion projects. So that I don't think I've ever considered myself, even though I have built businesses and organizations, I've not really considered myself as an entrepreneur in the way that I interview entrepreneurs and I see them very focused on the business side of things. And I'm not always like that. I'm more on the idea and making a specific thing happen. But to answer your question, I guess when I started realizing it was at Future. So Future, I was there for probably about 12 years. And Future was founded by a guy called Chris Anderson. I don't know if how many of you know the full story, and I won't give it in its entirety, but it is interesting because Chris now runs and has done runs TED, which everybody's probably very familiar with, and he was an inspiration for me because he basically encouraged everybody within Future, no matter how old we were, and we were all quite young at the time, to come up with ideas for new magazines or new cover mounts for magazines or new marketing ideas. And he just basically encouraged us to do that. So the kind of the first job pretty much out of college was within an organization that had quite a flat hierarchy of ideas. And so it meant that you could try stuff out and then you would present it to a group of decision makers. And then before you knew it, you would made editor or publisher of this thing. And they were just saying, go on, go and do it. So, and I stayed at Future that long because pretty much every 18 months or so, I was given the opportunity for a new project to make something happen. So, and that's kind of where I learned much more about business and communication and all of that stuff. So yeah, I think I experienced it there. And then I eventually left Future because it had got quite big, and certainly once it became a publicly quoted company, its rhythm was different. I remember the CEO at the time when I had announced I was leaving, had told me, "Yeah, it's about time you left because there's no room for entrepreneurs here anymore." so that was quite telling. Not that that's the case now for Future. I think Future has totally reinvented itself and shown, had been very successful in the process. And then after that, I had to, I sort of hit the filter. So, and that was had already been built in its initials, his 1.0 version. So I didn't start the filter from scratch. I was brought in by the investors to try and take it from its first version to a more commercial offering. So that was really interesting. But yeah, I think I just like to make things happen and get some really cool people around me to help me make that happen.
And in terms of those people and for things like the filter, where you've worked with organizations, and I know in other organizations where you've come in and you've taken a department or an organization within an organization, how important has that team been, and how do you build that team? How do you motivate that team? Because I think a lot of the founders and leaders that we're talking to on a day by day, they know that the team is central to what they're doing. And certainly at the moment, motivating and developing team is absolutely key. So anything people can hear about how you do that is always super useful.
Yeah, I think basically finding the right people and developing the right culture, the team around you is absolutely critical. And I think I've certainly always enjoyed working with people and trying to understand what motivates them from early on. But I've got to say, it's not until the last 10 years of my career where I've really understood a little bit more the techniques of what you can do to nurture that and to really create a strong team. And I think the team I have at Dialect now, this was the real opportunity I had, because when I joined Dialect, there was like UK, and there's now 30, and we've really created a very strong senior management team as well as a strong team overall. And I when I started, I told John, my business partner, I was like, I want to make this the best place I've ever worked. Everything I've learned in the past 25 years about what works and what doesn't work, let's apply, let's understand that and apply it here, because we have an opportunity to. And it's working really well. I mean, the culture we have is a culture that's built together. So it's not, you can't impose a culture, is my view. You've got to build it with the people around it. You can't go, here's a ping pong table, and expect, suddenly you're a startup or whatever. It's got to be a lot more than that. You've got to understand what people why they might want things to do whilst they're in the office that doesn't involve work, and you have to understand what motivates them to come to work and all of those sort of things. So yeah, building a team is essential. I think just the example with the filter was quite interesting because I joined a company where the founders were still within the company, and I joined as CEO. So that was brought in by the investors. So that can be an interesting thing to do, and you just basically have to get the founders and the rest of the team on side and aligned, and if they're not, you need to make changes. And so I kind of, with the filter, there was a combination of bringing in some additional people on the senior team, but also aligning, getting a direction that everybody agreed with, and including the founders, and aligning investors, founders, team, all in the same direction, and keeping that as tightly knit as possible. So yeah, I don't know what are the things that I think are the most important are. So these are the values that we now have here at Dialect. So I'm trying to remember these ones and how I've learned them in the past. But mainly, one of the main things is, and that sounds so bloody obvious, but basically everybody's an adult, so everybody has responsibilities. And there's a very simple transaction for me when somebody joins my team is you are given lots of freedom and responsibilities, and in return, I expect you to deliver, on those responsibilities. If there are challenges to do that, we talk about it. But basically, that's it. I expect you to deliver, and you have that full responsibility. Therefore, you're not going to expect. I'm not going to micromanage you. I'm not going to be checking that you're you're in at 9 and leaving at 5. There's none of that. You've got to be treated as you are, an adult with responsibilities. So that's a really key one. And I find that even though it's so obvious, so many companies don't do that. They immediately, there's a little bit of mistrust. Are they really going to work the hours I want them to work? Are they really going to, it's just fundamentally the wrong approach. The right approach is we're all trying to achieve this. Your part in achieving this is to do X, Y, and Z. I'm going to give you the tools and support and everything you need to do that, but you have to own the doing of that, and that does make a massive difference. And then on top of that, I think you just have to make sure you listen. You listen to everybody in the organization, because there's always little signs of things that might not be going quite right, or signs that your message is not being put across in the right way. But you have to listen rather than unlike what I'm doing now, rather than just talking all the time. You have to actually listen quite a lot.
And in terms of building out that culture, I guess some of that is around really understanding your recruitment process. So you have to make sure you're getting the right people in who can be who are adults effectively. And if that doesn't work, is it a case of, so I've read a lot about where that type of thing doesn't work, it's better for everyone to be honest with it from the off and say 6 weeks in, 8 weeks in, 3 months in, actually you're not a cultural fit here, rather than just being very British about it and just sort of trying to not upset anyone and then ending up with someone that's not right.
Yeah, I mean that is critical. So the way to, well, not the way to do it, there are many ways, but the way we do it is we start right from the top, in the sense of we've got a set of principles and values as a business. Actually, everybody in the team has certainly monthly and quarterly one-on-ones with their boss. And one of the things we ask them to talk about is how they show that they are living and working to the set of values and principles that we have as a business. By the way, those values and principles were designed with the whole team together. So it wasn't the 10 commandments from the board. It was something we actually, what are we as a team? And we came up with that together. So then as we go forward for the existing team, we always ask at least every 3 months, okay, what are you doing to make sure that, for example, one of our values is we always do what we say we're going to do. That's for ourselves, but also for our clients. So we make sure, okay, are you still able to do that? Are you struggling for time or resources to do that, etc.? So that's the first thing. Then when it comes to recruitment, you use those same values and principles when you do your person specifications, and you really try very hard to make sure that you are giving people the chance in the recruitment process to basically illustrate how they would fit to those, and how they're examples of where, you know, they've shown already that they've got those similar principles and similar values. And mostly it's fairly straightforward to do that. I think the one area which is always hard to recruit people and make sure they're hitting those principles is salespeople, because salespeople by their nature are great at, they'll basically say whatever they need to say, right? Yeah. So, but other than that, I find that's the start point. Make sure you've got a clear mission and strategy, which is backed up by values and principles, which you then use throughout the organization and in your recruitment.
Cool. And your team, the organization itself is pretty international. So you're used to working across cultures, across time zones. Presumably you're now at a point where everybody's working from home. Yeah. Does that play in when you're doing all of that? What are you, I assume well, I know you're using things like Zoom. Are there other tools that you're using for that type of stuff?
Yeah, so we, in a way, we actually were designed to work from wherever, because when the John and Jack, the founders, started this company in San Francisco, but they actually started it from home as a start point. They then took them a year to get an office together, and they were, in the first couple of years, they were just working in the US. But once we set up the UK branch, which is where a lot of the content gets created, and actually nowadays where all of the media, data, content happens, and a lot of the management, we actually recruited a team that was not necessarily all based in Bristol or Bath. So it was designed from the outset, it was designed to work from wherever. There's only really one part of our business where we need to be somewhere physical, and that's because we do a lot of video content. We do have studios. Yeah. But even then, at the moment, we've actually rebuilt those studios within people's houses because that's the way we had to do it. But in terms of tools, so I wrote a post about this only about a week ago, I think, on LinkedIn. Because we were designed for working from wherever, we have a stack which is entirely cloud-based solutions. So we're obviously from the core ones are G Suite. Yeah. Which allows you to obviously build, none of us use Microsoft, so we're all using Google Documents and Sheets and Slides. Every document that we, is organized in terms of, there's no server. We're all using the G Drive as our structure. And then in terms of communications, we are massive users of Slack, both for ourselves, but also with our clients. We use Zoom for all our communication pretty much. We use an amazing tool called Airtable, which I don't know how many of you are aware of it, but it's basically a very powerful database, but with a more sort of Google Sheets-like UI on top of it. And it allows you to do things like when we do very complicated campaigns where we have maybe hundreds of assets that need to be created and checked by clients, we basically put all of that information in that database, which allows you to create tasks and people responsible, but also a sign-off process, and you share that with the client. So that's super powerful. We use Harvest to log our time against projects. We use Timetastic to book holidays and time off. I'm missing some, I'm sure. Oh, Frame.io, which is because we're in the video space for if you basically create a video and you want your client or indeed the team to comment on where they want things to change. And it's basically you watch the video and there's a timeline, but you can then put the comments directly against the timeline. So then the video editor will go, at 3 minutes 32, there's a specific comment from the client saying, I don't like this particular graphic or whatever. So, I mean, there's loads more tools we use, but basically everything is, as you can imagine, it's all in the cloud, and they all integrate. All of our tools integrate with Slack, so all notifications then come through Slack. So, and
I have to say, having spent what feels like about 400 hours on a video conferencing in the last week, the genuinely best £10 I've ever spent for work is a very long Cat5 wire that's connected my computer directly to our router. I'm provided because we were struggling on Wi-Fi, and it's made such a difference, and it was a tenner. So everyone should go and buy a wire.
That's good advice. Even in our office, which is like got a half a gigabit lit line going up and down, we've connected our Zoom rooms, which are basically with Zoom, you can have specific rooms. We've connected those directly through Ethernet, whereas the rest of the business primarily is Wi-Fi, because it avoids any glitches on the communication and video side.
So if we move on. In the questions I gave you, this is quite a depressing question, but probably quite pertinent at the moment. So you've worked across music, across publishing, across at least one major global recession. So you've got quite a lot of experience of industries being disrupted. Do you have any advice for people who are running small, mid-sized businesses? How do you cope with that level of disruption?
Yeah, it's a tough one, isn't it? Because in this particular case, we're yet to understand the full impact of not only the staying at home issues, but actually what happens after that. The impact of all of us staying at home for potentially, let's say, 3 months. If you take China as an example, then that has a specific impact, but then what has happened to a bunch of companies and a bunch of people's jobs? What's the impact post that for the next 6, 9, 12 months? So it's really hard to understand what that impact will be. I think my experience of the most recent downturn before this was 2008, and I was at the filter. I joined in 2007. And I had some money raised, but by 2008, I had to raise another round just literally after it all crashed. So raising money for a business that you believe in, but also to support 30 people and salaries and stuff, was particularly challenging. But having said that, my experience then, and it's my experience at the moment with the current crisis, is that you have to look for the opportunities, because there are opportunities, and I don't mean that in a let's put some scams out there kind of way, because that's pretty horrific. But I do mean that there's a massive shift, as per this exact thing we're doing now, towards online communication, web-based communication, and online content. So in my world, which is mostly content related, always has been, whether it was magazines or my podcast or music and video and stuff like that. My world is moving more and more towards digital and towards remote. And so the opportunities there, we're having clients who are suddenly going to us, we need to pivot so that we have some more content, which is educational web-based content. There's a whole bunch of companies now going at 100 miles an hour to try and change their educational content so it's web-based. Universities are trying to do that. My daughter's in second year uni, and she's trying to continue with her second year, but they're not ready for it. There are opportunities there for sure. But I've got to say, I'm saying that because that's my mentality and approach. But I can say that from a position of being currently in a business that is still very busy and very buoyant. I don't know how I'd be reacting if I was in a sector that was decimated. So please don't. I don't want it to sound like I'm being opportunistic. It's more from I'm in an environment where you can look at those positives. But I think there's a real massive challenge for so many sectors and so many businesses that I wouldn't really have an answer for. I've got to be honest.
And I think in terms of business support and what government advice is out there, we've spent a lot of time in the last week and a half talking to central and local government. Lots of that support isn't applicable to a lot of our businesses, but to the broader audience, I guess, if there are things around in that space that you want to talk about, that you want to understand, drop me a note and I will have a chat with you, because I've, unfortunately for me, learned all about these different support systems at the moment. So I can tell you all of the ones that probably don't apply to you. So I've got a final question, and then I think a couple of people are dropping questions into the chat. So the final question I'm going to ask is a question we ask everybody for everything now, which is, what is your favourite thing about the Bristol and Bath digital community?
Wow. So, I mean, my favorite thing has still got to be some of the, I've made some of my strongest connections and indeed friends through that community. I find the ability to call somebody up or email somebody to meet up for a coffee because you want to discuss an idea, no matter how silly it is. I find there's always people prepared to give you their time and to help, and ideally you also do that in return. So there's very much it was kind of the what San Francisco was like in like 10 years ago, 15 years ago, when it was less all about money. It was very much, you would go there even as an outsider like me, and you'd go and say, meet somebody, and then you would ask them for a favor. Well, you wouldn't even have to ask, because the first thing they would say is, what can I do for you? You know, and that I find in Bristol, and that's not really the case in San Francisco so much now, but in Bristol and Bath, I find that's still very much the case, is that people still have time for each other. And that has got to be my favorite thing, you know, whether it's Dave Kelly from Storm calling us up and going, hey, I want to plant a bunch of trees. Who's interested? And or me with my podcast idea. I've always then got people prepared to sort of either help and support and sponsor, or get involved, or point me in the right direction. You know, you, Ben, introduced me to a bunch of people to talk to. You know, it's fantastic. So that is my favorite thing.
I think it's a really powerful differentiator here against other places. For anyone listening, we will afterwards, we'll send around a full link to David's podcasts. And we will also drop in a link for the Reforest project that David just mentioned, that Dave and Storm are pulling together, which is about planting thousands and thousands of trees. It started as a really small project that Storm, the agency, wanted to do as a 10th birthday. And in very typically Bath ways, it has now grown into something where the team are trying to raise £500,000 to plant the entire forest. So it's really interesting, really cool project. So we'll send that round to everyone. So we've got a couple of questions here, David. One of them is more technical than the others. So I'll give you the technical question first. Have you used OKRs with your teams to drive performance? For anyone that doesn't know, an OKR stands for Objectives and Key Results. And how have you, if you have, how have you implemented those effectively?
So we haven't quite done it in that way. I mean, we use the way we work with our teams is we use a thing called the fishbone, which I basically took from my time at Immediate. It's only basically, fishbone is just a structure of, you can imagine a fish with different bones coming off the center and the headpiece, and the headpiece is more about what you're focusing on specifically for that time period, but the bones have like headlines of the key areas or the key objectives, and then you've got within each sort of line down on the bone, so the smaller bones can be the steps you need to take towards it. It's just a visual way of doing, of looking at priorities. I think that the key, regardless of which tool you use, for me, the key is we don't do anything on an annual basis. We do everything on a monthly and quarterly basis. And we just make sure that people are given the time to sort of step back from their day to day and understand how what they're focusing on and what they're prioritizing, how it impacts the company's targets as well as their own. And also we relate it back to, as I said earlier, to how they're living and the principles and values. So that's all tied together, but we don't use the OKR approach really.
And in terms of, this is more to do with your client base, I guess. Do you think the gaming sector is going to thrive in this climate? And if that is so, what are the opportunities for publishers?
Well, it's totally thriving at the moment. Whether that's just a reaction to everybody finding themselves at home. I mean, I can't remember what the exact numbers were, but Steam, which is a platform for where you get your games from, had like its busiest ever weekend last weekend, I think it was. Gaming services, I think, like Xbox Live and Nintendo Online had a sort of jump of something like 70%, I read somewhere. And generally from our clients, we work with NVIDIA and Logitech and Wizards of the Coast, and we've just been appointed by Rebellion Games to run their YouTube channel for them. For us, what we're hearing is, they are experiencing a boom for sure, which is probably no surprise. Now, whether that's going to be sustained, my guess is it will. But therefore there are opportunities, but obviously games developers, you take quite some time with games developers. You don't suddenly build a game overnight. These things sometimes take years. So I think there are opportunities there for sure, but you have to sort of think about it holistically in terms of where are people going to be spending their time, on what platforms, and therefore what kind of games and services should you be offering with an increased audience, I guess, because they're at home a lot more. Cool.
Thank you for that. So I think we will pretty much wrap it up there. It's a bit odd because this is normally the point where we get the standing ovation. But there doesn't seem to be a way to do that digitally. But thank you very much, David. As always, super useful, really good hints and tips for people. If people want to talk to us afterwards, I'm sure we're willing to have chats.
Can I make one last plea? Is that okay? Like on a radio show, I'm kind of going, can I have, so for seeking out the next generation, one of the most important things for us is, because we want to talk to everyday people and find out, how they've experienced something, might have been traumatic or might have been just positive or whatever. We're basically always on the lookout for introductions to potential interviewees or guests for the podcast. So anybody's got any ideas, the main stipulation is that they need to be under the age of 30. So from the younger generations. But other than that, we're looking for anybody who's got an interesting and inspirational story to tell and is obviously happy to share that on a podcast.
Cool. Yeah. And we'll happily share details. If anyone drops TechSPARK a note, we can pass those on. More than happy to do that.
Brilliant. Thank you.
Cool. Thanks, David. So for all of us that are still here, we'd love to encourage people to go to the networking area now. It'll give you a chance to network with some people you might not know, have some chats, do some stuff. I'll be hanging around for a bit. I think David has to go pretty soon. But thank you very much for listening. Let's do this again.